Welcome, everybody. We're going to be working on the first of the Chapter 5 exercises tonight, and we're going to start with exercise number 3. And what I want you to notice here is that this is a multi-part exercise, so there's a part A and a part B, and each has its own program that you're basically writing, so it's kind of like two programs in one. Right. The description says, write an application for the Shady Rest Hotel. The program determines the price of a room. Ask the user to choose 1 for a queen bed, 2 for a king, or 3 for a king and a pullout. The output echoes the input and displays the price of the room. 125 for a queen, 139 for a king, and 165 for a suite with a king bed and a pullout couch. If the user enters an invalid code, display an appropriate message and set the price to 0. Right. All right. So kind of pretty straight ahead, right? I mean, the description is fairly straight ahead. So we are going to have to start to build this. So let's go and take clips and let's do the preliminary setup work here to begin with. Now, I'm in Eclipse, and you notice I have all my stuff open from last time. So I'm just going to go up to the File menu and choose Close All. It closes all the open tabs. And now I have like a blank screen to start with. In the Package Explorer here, I do want to create a new project. So I'm going to go up to the File menu, choose New, Java Project. This is going to be my Chapter 5 exercises, so I'm going to call it that. Chapter 5 exercises. Spaces are okay here. Right. I'm going to go ahead and click Finish. And then inside project folder here, I'm going to right-click and create a new class file. I'm doing it on the source folder. It doesn't matter so much, really, because it'll end up there anyhow. Package declaration is blank. We do want this to be an executing program. We're not doing a class, an object structure here, right? There'll be times when we pull that back in, but right now we're focusing on what if statements do, basically. So we are going to do a public static void main. Let's give it a name. They wanted us to call it Shady Rest Room. All right, so Shady Rest Room, like so. All right, and you can see we have the beginnings of what we need. All right. Now, I'm pretty sure from the description, we're probably going to end up using a scanner to get input. We're going to have a series of statements where we're making decisions and checking input from the users. So I can think of all the different little things I need to build. Okay, so the first thing that I mentioned, needing us to do is I'm pretty sure we're getting input from the user. So why don't we go ahead and put the scanner in immediately? So just typing scanner with a capital S. I'm letting it underline red, and then I'm using my magic little key sequence on Windows, which is Control Space, and it automatically adds the Java util scanner library, or the import up top there. I'm going to name my scanner input. You can name yours whatever you want. That makes sense to me, so that's what I do. I'm going to make a new one. So we're calling the constructor function here. You guys should recognize that now. We're bringing in system input, and we're terminating the statement. All right. Now I'm thinking here, when we're going to be prompting the user, so going back to the instructions here, so this is helpful to look at the instructions. It says this determines the price of a room, and there's more than one choice of room. So it's not like, okay, this is just the price. There's multiple different room types. So we're going to put a little screen up that basically says, these are the 3 options. Which one do you want? Right. And then they're going to type a number, and then it'll calculate the price. Right. So we're going to need a variable, and I'm going to make this an integer for the user's selection. So I'm going to number these, and I don't know if you guys caught that. It's like one is the room 1 is this, and room 2 is that, and room 3 is that. So we'll use an integer to capture that. The other thing that we'll need to do is we'll have to like calculate a price or store it to display it and manipulate it and maybe whatever. So I'm going to create one for price as well. All right. The other thing that I'm thinking about doing here is when I'm outputting the stuff to the screen, when I'm all done, right? So like I have, I just want to show people what it is in the end. And what I think would be nice is if they make a selection, right, that I put back up on the screen what their selection was and the price for it, right? And what I'm thinking about doing, and this is a technique that we haven't really tried yet, is I'm going to create a string variable and I'm going to call it result. And I'm going to use that variable, that whatever it is that I want to really put on the screen at the end is going to go inside that variable. And if I need to add stuff to it, I can, or remove it or delete it. But then all I have to do is output result and it'll all be there. You know, that's kind of my thinking on it. All right. I think that's about all we need for right now in terms of just generic variables. Let's read the next set of instructions here. All right. Determines the price of a room, and people will make a choice. So that's the selection. We got a thing for price. And then they're going to choose 1 for queen, 2 for king, 3 for king and a pull-out. So then our output would echo the input and displays the price of the room. If they put in an invalid code, give them an error message. So we haven't gotten to the point where we're really putting stuff on the screen yet, but I'm trying to think of a really clever way to orchestrate it. So if you guys can follow, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to set up values here for stuff. So instead of having to deal with numbers, I can just call them by their names. So follow with me on this. And I think this is kind of a neat approach. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set up 3 constants. They're all going to be integers. And I want you to notice how I'm going to do this. So the convention for naming constants is to use all uppercase. So I'm going to set queen to 1, king to 2, and sweet, you know, it's the king bed with the pull-out couch, it's a 3. And I want you to notice a couple things here. I did that. I declared 3 constants in one statement. It's kind of interesting, right? Because really they're all integers and they're all constants. So this applies to all of them. And then I just listed, assign a value, comma, the next one, listed, assign the value, comma, and the same thing. So I declared 3 constants all in one line. Very efficient. Now, anytime I want to look at queen, king, or sweet, they're really representing numbers, but now I can just use their names, which makes more sense to me as a human being, right? The other thing is the cost of the rooms is a given too. It's not something that's going to change, or at least change very often. So we're going to make those constants as well. And yeah, normally if I do prices, I usually do them as doubles, but whole dollar amounts for hotels is fine. So we're going to make them integers. So really what we're going to do here is we're going to have a price structure for each one. So I'm going to have a Q price for the queen price, which is 125. I'm going to have a K price or king price, which is 139. And then S price, which will be the suite price, which is 165. Once again, these are all constants, and I did them all on one line. You see the efficiency there, right? So I don't have to like, you know, list them out. I could, you know, if I wanted to, for example, I could have done selection, comma, price up here. I could have done that. That would have been fine too. It's kind of the equivalent, really. I'm just showing you the shortcut. All right. So these are things I'm going to keep using all the time in here. Now, the other thing that I'm going to do is I'm gonna put in a whole series of these things now that I'm going to use to basically drive the content on the screen by having a bunch of constants pre-created that make this stuff possible and happen almost magically, right? And this is the whole thing. So I don't have to type a bunch of words in my system outs. I'm just going to put in a little constant, and then that's going to do the work, right? So follow with me here on this. I'm going to do another final, but this will be a series of strings, right? And I'm going to do kind of the same format. I'm going to say Q string for queen, and that's going to be queen bed. Now, I know a lot of people say, well, that's almost as long as the variable name. I'm like, yeah, true. But you know what? It's the principle here because it could be paragraphs, you know. But in this case, it's just a couple of words. We'll do the same thing for the king. So we'll say K string. This is just a descriptor. Maybe this isn't the best name. Maybe I should call it like DESC, like for description, whatever. You know, it doesn't really matter what we call it. So we'll call this king bed. I'm going to add a space here. It just looks better. And then we'll do, and actually I used a capital B before, so I'm going to try to be consistent. And then we'll do the S string, which is for the suite. And we'll say suite with a king bed and pull out couch. So now it seems a little more efficient because now if I want to say all that, I just say S string, you know, and that's kind of the thing. Now there is also kind of this thought that another prefab message that we might have, so I'm going to add another one to this, is, and because this is all part of a comma list again, right, I'm just going to move it down to the next line like this. I'm just going to add one more line here, and I'm going to have one for invalid string. So if they enter something that's wrong, I will have a default error message, something like an invalid option. Whatever, you can say whatever you want, right? And sometimes error messages are better developed after the program's running, so you see what it looks like on the screen, but we'll figure it out. So these are my pre-configured messages, right? Some of them. Now, the other thing that we want to kind of think about here is, are there any other variables that we really need? We have the prices, we have the options, the selections, we have the descriptions. These are all written out, right? And I think we're okay. So maybe now what we need to do is start putting stuff on the screen, and then we can start allowing the user to make a selection. So here, this is basically our setup, right? These are all of our variables and constants and pieces of information that we need and our scanner to run the program. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a menu on the screen, right? And we haven't done a lot of this either. We've done a whole lot of system out print line, but not with purpose in mind usually. So here's an example of me doing a system out print line. And I'm going to start with maybe even a blank line, but here's what I'm thinking in my head. All right, so I'm going to put in some double quotes here. I want to put a menu on the screen. So this is going to pop up on the screen and it'll say menu. And then it'll list the rooms and number them, and then put up a thing saying enter your selection 1, 2, or 3. Okay. So if I'm putting that on the screen, I might have like at the very top, like menu, right? And then I might have another system out print line. And you see, I know I'm going to do a bunch of these, so I'm going to kind of get clever here and type a blank one and then copy it. And then I'll paste it as I need it. So Control C to copy. And then inside here for my menu, I might just put in some dashes. Not, yeah, that should be inside a double quote, right? So let's do it like that. I'm just like failing on all cylinders here. All right, there we go. All right, that was really challenging. All right, here's more my system out print lines, and I'm going to do 3 of them. This is where I'll list the 3 different room types. Then I'll have the bottom part, kind of like a bottom border for my menu, doing a little ASCII art here, right? And then I'll do a prompt where I won't do print line, I will do print. And then here I will just basically say, enter selection. And then, I'm going to tell them what they should type. It's going to be 1, 2, or 3. Those are their choices. I'm telling them what their choices are. And then a little prompt symbol there. And I'm waiting for them to do the input. Once they do the input, we will capture it. So we'll say selection, whatever they typed, will be taken from the input, converted to an integer, and then stored in the variable selection, which holds integers. And then we'll evaluate this to see what thing we do next, right? That's where we're at. But let's get this part entered in now, which are the 3 different room types. And then hopefully you guys will start seeing the logic of like how I'm putting the stuff on the screen. I'm going to zoom in a couple more clicks here. I think that'll help you to see it a little bit better as I'm coding it. All right. So here, I basically want to do a listing and I want to say, okay, choice 1, right? The queen bed. And then whatever the message is for the queen bed. And just to kind of list it as nicely as possible. And I'm going to be using the constants up above. And this isn't, like I said, the greatest example of this, but what I'm trying to show you is that you can leverage stuff that you've pre-created to make your output a little bit more efficient. And so if you can follow with what I'm doing here, I'm going to put in a parentheses. I'm going to put in the value for queen, which is the number 1. And then I'm going to concatenate to it a closing parenthesis like this. Right. So that'll have 1 inside of parentheses. So it'll look nice. It doesn't seem like it would look nice, but it will. And then after the parentheses, I will leave 1 space, heck, maybe even 2, but I will try 1 to start with. And then what I'm going to add after that is the Q string that I probably should have called, queen description or something, but I just called it Q string. So it's going to tell me what the features of the queen room are. Ours is very simplistic, right? We're going to follow that technique now. So basically, I'm just going to copy all of the contents inside of here and just paste them down. And then I'm going to switch this to king and K string. And then, oops, let's paste again. And then this would be suite and S string. Now here's what I suggest. This is very primitive right now. That it doesn't really do anything, but it will run and it will put stuff up on the screen. So let's see what the menu looks like. I think it's not a bad idea to run it at this point and just look. So here comes the run. It's going to ask to save if I didn't. Yep, I didn't. And then it's going to put it on the screen, and there it is. So there's my menu, and see how it says my options. 1, queen bed. 2, king bed. 3, suite with king bed and pull-out couch. And when I look at this, it looks like I need to add a whole bunch more dashes to make that look nicer. So I am going to do that. That's the kind of geeky stuff I do, right? I don't know how many, but almost like twice as many. So I'm going to grab this many. And then I look at my menu thing and I'm like, you know what? It would be nice if it didn't just pop up on the screen like that. Maybe a couple of blank lines before it. So I'm going to do /n/n. That's 2 blank lines. And then I'm not sure I like menu all the way over at the left margin. I will also do a /t for a tab stop. And then, you know what? Let's see what this looks like. Let's just run this. So ask to save. There it is. And there's the revision. All right. I don't know. Do you like that better? I'm not sure I like the menu indented now that I look at it. Right. Not so good. All right. So I will get rid of the tab stop. But I do like the blank lines at the top. And you know what? It might even look good if I took like the dotted lines, right, and put them before the menu. I don't know. Well, this is probably fine. Right. So there it is. Now, when the program is running, it's still waiting for input. I can just press enter and we're done. Right. But now we need to start getting to the logic part. So we have basically the interface made. And now the user can enter in their selection. Then we just have to drive the results based on the selection. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a series of if statements here. So I'm going to add to this. So right below here, I'm going to write an if statement. So here's our very first if statement, folks. I'm going to write the keyword if. I'm going to use a set of parentheses. I will tell you the parentheses can be considered optional in some circumstances. I recommend you always include them, right? So if you're used to doing like Python, for example, you don't use them. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to check the selection that they made and see if that's the same as the bet options that I have. So I could check and see if they entered 1, 2, or 3, or I can use the symbolic name of it, which is easier in my brain to associate them together. See, right? So I have to, what number was queen? Right. So we only have 3 product types, and the product numbers are 1, 2, 3. Really easy to remember. But what if you were working for like Amazon and they have 10 million products and they all have unique SKUs? You would never remember. It's easier to have a reference. It's kind of the point. All right. So we're going to check to see if these are equal. Now, when we do an if statement, we put a statement like this in there. And what we're really truly doing is using a double equal sign. We are doing a comparison. So the difference between a single equal sign and a double, with a single equal sign, we're taking whatever's on the right and assigning it to whatever's on the left. With a double equal sign, this is a logical operator, we're checking for equivalency. So I'm saying, is selection, should be the numbers 1, 2, or 3, equal to the number that queen is equal to, which is 1. So if they select number 1, what's our action? What we're going to do is we're going to take the price, the blank price variable we created, and we're going to put into it the hard-coded price for the queen room, right? And the result string is going to take the message that goes with the queen room, which is the Q string, which says, what does it say? Queen bed. So price, queen bread is what it's going to say. And then we have both of those stored, right? And then ultimately what we'll do, so if they choose queen, we'll take that and we'll output it to the screen. So for example, here's the system out. And I'm just going to paste this in. So after this if statement is all done, we're going to do this. And we're just going to say, you selected result, queen bed and the price. That's going to be kind of the grand aspect of it. Now, I am getting some underlines here, and I'm not really sure. The local variable result may not have been initialized. So in other words, what they're saying here is that it never had a price or value to start with. And yeah, that's true. These did not have values. So if you want to eliminate that error, you can do it a couple different ways. One would be you could preset the price to 0 just in case somebody doesn't type something in. And you could take the result and just make it an empty string. Those would be 2 things you could do. Notice the underlines go away, right? Let's run this just with this if statement. We'll type in the number 1 and we'll see if it gives us the right result, right? And if that works, we'll add the rest, right? So here we go. Asking to save, and now the program's running. Here's my menu on the screen, right? Enter selection 1, 2, or 3. Clicking into the window here, I'm going to type 1. Press enter and cross my fingers. Okay, it worked. So you selected queen bed for $125. Looks pretty good. So the first menu option is working. If I would run this again and I selected number 2, okay, so now it just says I didn't select anything and it's 0. Okay, well, okay, that's not right. So we have to fix that one and we have to fix number 3. So let's do that. Let's make accommodations for that now. Right. So back over here, we have an if statement and we're checking to see first, is it a queen that they picked, right? But what if it's not? Maybe they didn't choose that. So there's a second option. So we're going to do an else if statement here. And then we're going to check to see if this needs to be inside parentheses, not curly brackets. So we're going to check to see if that selection is equivalent, not to queen, but to king, right? So if it's equivalent to king, then what's the result here? Well, we're basically going to do the same thing we did here, but we're going to do it with the king bed stuff, right? So instead of the Q price, it'll be the K price. And the result, or the text that goes on the screen, is going to be the K string, which goes with the king bed. All right. The other option, of course, so we can do the other one right away too, is we can check to see if that selection is equivalent to the suite, which is number 3. If that's true, then we'll do the same thing here again, but instead we will say S price for suite price and S string for the description of this suite. One other scenario here we got to think about. What if they don't type 1, 2, or 3? Right. Well, that's an error, basically. We want them to type the right thing. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just put, I'm just going to say that the result is, remember this one? Right. So I'm just going to say the result equals invalid string. So error message, basically. And the price gets set to 0. Now here, normally I would set the price to 0 here, but here is what happened. We already set the price to 0 up here, so we don't need to do it. So all I need is the error message. Price is already set to 0. Right. Now let's run it again and see if it will get the result that we need. And then we'll ask the question, is the program complete? I think we would be complete at this point. So here comes the save and the run. Right. There it is in the console at the bottom. So it's prompting, king, queen, or whatever. We already tried the queen once. Let's try the king. That worked. Let's run it again. Let's try the suite. That worked. Run it again. Well, better try queen again just to make sure. Okay, that still works. And let's try not putting in anything. Oh, it didn't like that very much at all, did it? What if I type some letters? Okay, well, that makes it crash. Right? So we'll have to work out a way to work around that. We haven't learned those techniques yet, but this would basically be exception handling is what we'd call that. Let's try running it again. And this time, instead of 1, 2, or 3, we put in 4. Right. So it likes numbers better than letters. Right. But we could, in principle, put in statements that check for that. We're not quite ready for that yet, but we would call that input validation to make sure that they're putting in numbers when they should be putting in numbers, or letters when they should be putting in letters. This is a little bit more primitive. We're checking for 1, 2, or 3. If it's a number other than that, we kind of handle it a little bit. But if they put in letters, it breaks the program still. So that, once again, more advanced skill. All right. I would call this the completed part 1. So this would be exercise 3, part A. Right. What I'd like to do now, I'd like to take a quick little break if you guys don't mind. So let's take a break. I'll pause the video and then we can come back. That's in about 5 minutes or so. So I'll see you guys. So here's what I'm going to do. I realized that I didn't record some of this last stuff and I must have paused at some point and then not unpause. So what I'm going to do here is we have done a complete build out. So I'm going to just do a top down read through the code. So here's the first part of the code. So the original menu structure and all the variables that we created. Once you get past that initial menu, it runs the if statement to see which you selected, puts together the string and the price. Then we remove the old system out print line, check to see if we had captured a valid price, which is an indicator of choosing a valid bed. Put a new menu on the screen to let them, once they've chosen a room type, to decide, do they want a lake view or a park view? And then based upon that, we either upcharge them for the lake view or charge them the normal price for the park view and then display the message. So that's the entire program right there, folks. Right. And then make sure you run it and test it and try all the different scenarios. And once again, I'm not really crazy about all that error messages and screen messages I develop, but I don't want to spend my whole night writing those. Right. But if you were writing a real application, you would think about that stuff, like how it looks in the screen, what you're saying to the user, what you're prompting them to do is all very important. All right, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to move, I think, to the next exercise here, and at least kind of do a preview of it. But I think we're going to try to wrap up a little early here tonight, and I hope you guys are cool with that. I'm sure there'll be no complaints. But let's take a look at that next one just to kind of get a lay of the land as far as what we have to do. So the next one is exercise 7. So I'm going to scroll down to exercise 7 here in the book. And you can see I got that goofy little icon thing there, whatever that does, a highlighter. And this will be our challenge. So what I'm going to do here is, because we are coming up on midterms, I'm not going to code through the rest of this tonight. We have plenty of time to get it in, so we'll work on this next time. But I do want to kind of give you a read through so you can think about how you might want to do this. Now, what's interesting about this exercise is this takes us back to the class and object approach, right? So we are going to create a class file and we're going to test that class file like we were doing in chapter 4. So it says, create a class that holds data about a job applicant, include a name, phone number, and 4 Boolean fields that represent whether the applicant is skilled in each of the following areas: word processing, spreadsheets, databases, and graphics. Include a constructor that accepts values for each of the fields. Also include a get method for each field. Notice it doesn't say anything about setters, just gets, right? Create an application that instantiates several job applicant objects and passes each in turn to a Boolean method that determines whether each applicant is qualified for an interview. Then in the main method, display an appropriate method for each applicant. A qualified applicant has at least 3 of the 4 skills. And it tells you how to save the files. All right, so that's the preview of the exercise that we're going to do. And we're going to do that next week. Now, if you guys are ambitious, I know that you can go out and look on my YouTube channels and probably find the solution for this. But I would challenge you to try to code it on your own first and see how far you get. And then if you want, just wait till next week and I'll show you how it's solved. But I'd be really curious to see what your solution is if you come up with one that works. Right? Because I was like, all right. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to stop the video. So this video ends here.